Hello listeners, and welcome to a Christmas edition of the Montel Weekly Podcast. Ho, 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 ho. Bringing the most topical energy matters in a festive way. My name is Richard Sverrisson, and I'm joined today by a bunch of my colleagues at Montel. Nora Kamprath Buli, who's editor Germany. Welcome to you, Nora.
Merry Christmas.
And Olav Vilnes, chief editor Nordics. Welcome to you, Olav.
Thank you.
And Gert. Happy to have you back on, reporter Nordics.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, Morten Hegna, who's markets manager at Montel. Welcome to you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Today we want to have a roundup of the year that's just gone and to look forward. Now, if I can start by just looking at some of the highs and lows. In Germany, Nora, what would you say were the high points, or what were the most important aspects or developments in Germany last year, or this year?
Well, first brings to mind that we've had a massive drop in the wind power expansion at a time when Germany is counting most on building out its renewables base. At the same time, we've made progress with plans to announce a coal exit, which was announced at the beginning of the year, now has spent or taken the rest of the year to kind of formalise, and was still not quite there. But I think those two have been key developments for Germany for this year and going forward.
And that's something that will obviously continue to impact next year as well. We'll come back to that later, Nora. But how about in the Nordic markets, Olav and Gert? Maybe I can start with you, Olav.
I think one very major impact is, of course, the huge renewable expansion that you've seen in across the region, and particularly when it comes to wind in Norway and Sweden. And what you've seen in Norway this year is the counter effect on that. I mean, you've seen the opposition coming up, limiting the growth problem potentially in the future, with people sort of being against wind power for environmental reasons and also for the visual reasons. And
so a slowdown in the Nordics, but for different reasons, and it's a different background than in Germany. How about you, Gert? High points or the most key elements of this year?
Of course, the wind power debate has kind of been the most important thing, but we also sense that there is some picking up on the demand side. The oil industry seems very keen to connect the platforms to the grid to get power from shore, and that might change the picture quite a bit going a few years ahead. They have around maybe 2,000 megawatts increased power consumption, which will turn out to be maybe 17 terawatt hours a year of increased consumption.
So how much of that came online this year?
Well, this is plans a bit going forward. The power sector, the oil sector used today around 12 terawatt hours a year, and it might more than double that, and that's an increase of more than 10% of the Norwegian power consumption.
Yeah, that's
that might be
no,
definitely.
And what kind of time frame are we talking about?
Maybe 5 years ahead. So it can really pick up in a quite short time here.
What you, as you're a very close observer of the market, you're not one of the writers of the stories here at Montel, but what do you think?
From what we have experienced from the clients is that they are very concerned about the market development as such in the Nordics. There was a setback with the happenings in 2018 that we will not cover that much now, but still the liquidity in the market has not raised again, and that has troubled the players a lot. And we have discussed this on several events during the year as well, how to make this market better. Having more consumption coming in now in the Nordics potentially, that could actually increase the interest for trading the Nordic market, and also how to face all the phased-in renewables will of course also change the market and impact how people will use this market in the time to come.
Well, last year in 2018 there was the big Enos incident, but has that still had ramifications this year? Would you say, Morten?
Yes, it has. Still, there have been new members at Nasdaq as well. Some has also turned down their business. But when it comes to the volumes, of course, that is really lacking compared to the good old days when you had the huge players.
Absolutely. So another key element for me has been the continuing problems at French nuclear reactors, which have been driving certainly the market at certain points throughout the year. So we had the issues with the steam generators, and then the earthquakes at Cruas, and those Cruas reactors, they're due back online, but they've certainly been offline for several weeks. But there are other nuclear plants coming offline, aren't there, Nora? So, sort of this year?
Yes, Germany is losing a 1.4 gigawatt nuclear plant with Philipsburg 2. Is due to close at the end of the year, so obviously it's already in a sort of stretch out mode at the moment, where it's bit by bit reducing capacity, but the market has known about this for a long time. It's priced in. More of a wild card is potentially a dispute over remaining running hours for the nuclear plant Gronde, a dispute between Vattenfall and E.ON, which could potentially result in an earlier closure in the future.
That's a dispute between the companies and also the government? I mean, is it a matter of compensation or...?
It's more between the companies. The government has allowed for leftover quota from power plants that are already closed to be transferred to others. The Gronde plant is co-owned, or no, the Krümmel plant was co-owned, and it's about the quota left from that. And how they split that between the two companies, and there's an argument how much it should pay for it in order for it to go to E.ON, which needed to operate other plants for longer.
Nordic reactors are certainly a little bit more stable and robust than maybe some of their counterparts on the continent, at least if that's what the headlines tell us. But there's another plant coming offline here, isn't there, not in 2019, Olav? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you have the Ringhals nuclear reactor in Sweden. You had the second reactor there, 900 megawatt, that will be shut down at the end of this year. And then there's another Ringhals 1 reactor that will be closed at the end of next year. So if you add that to the two Oskarshamn reactors that were shut down a couple of years ago, then you have, in the end, almost a third of Sweden's nuclear fleet that has actually been shut down in just 3 or 4 years. That has, of course, a big impact on the power balance in Sweden. And you've seen there are concerns about the security of supply balance in the south of the country. So if you couple that with perhaps a lack of grid planning and all the wind farms coming up in the north, you have challenges there for the system that has been quite significant. And there are concerns in neighboring countries that Sweden maybe start curbing exports, for example, to Denmark, if they have problems at home. And that is there's an old problem there also in the past.
Between those good neighbours the Swedes and the Danes. But what's replacing that lost capacity? What's meeting the shortfall, Gert? Is it new wind, or is it...
there's a massive expansion of wind in Sweden. In the combined Norwegian and Swedish Elsøt scheme, there has been built 31.2 terawatt-hours since 2012, which is an incredible number. 21.6 of that is in Sweden. And there's a bit bio, but mainly wind power. And it's mainly located in the two northernmost price areas in Sweden, SA1 and SA2. So there is a risk of a really low prices in the north of the country and bottlenecks to the south, and then maybe a much more constrained situation in the south, because there are the main consumption and people living there.
Exactly, the populated areas, absolutely. So that's why this discussion with pushing the bottlenecks to the border. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there we have, increased demand. We haven't even talked about data centers yet, but increased demand from the offshore, a fallback in supply. What does this say about the market, Morten?
From what I see and what the players also tell us is that it will change the market, but it also should make new possibilities for them, I think. Again, it's very much depending upon how the weather will develop, so don't forget about that. We saw this year, that it has been very nice trends to follow based upon reliable weather forecasts, and we've seen up and down trends following the price signals, which is mostly related to weather.
I mean, what are the seasonal forecasts saying for the Q1 or the months ahead? Has anyone been following that? Olav, have you been...
I haven't followed that with the seasonal forecast, but if you look at the monthly forecast, there's a fresh monthly forecast which show that it will be very mild next week, but then it will probably turn colder, it will turn drier from the middle of December. And you can look at these measures you have from the analysts of the hydrological balance in the Nordic region, shows a deficit. So we have less hydropower in storage than in a normal year, which is bullish for prices, but it's not a big deficit. So I think there's still quite normal prices that they expect. And the Q1 price in the Nordic region is still priced below continental levels. There is like a €3 difference there up to below Germany.
So what about on the continent, Nora?
With the latest forecast, it has turned out a little bit cooler for December than previous forecasts have indicated. That has led to slightly higher assumptions mostly for December, though. The Q1 is still too uncertain, with Germany mostly being driven also by wind. Temperatures don't tend to impact as much on power prices as wind does, but oftentimes in the winter, mild weather goes hand in hand with a lot of wind and vice versa.
So it could have that kind of impact. We could be seeing that again. It doesn't look like there's going to be a beast from the east, but then you never know. You know, if you come January, it's probably come around the E-World time, which is the time of a big trade fair. That's normally when these things happen. But Nora, what other, for those listeners out there who want to maybe think about the key events next year? I mean, you discussed the coal exit, sure. Will we see coal plants coming off the grid? And even, a shortfall in supply in Germany. Could that happen? And what are the other key drivers for next year, do you think?
It's a good question whether we're going to see any plants coming offline. The coal exit law isn't done and dusted yet. We only have seen drafts that are still up for discussion. The sort of hardest evidence of potential closures we have at the moment is tenders for 4 gigawatts of closure that will be roughly next summer, are supposed to be held. However, there are concerns in the market that there is not enough incentive for anyone to bid into these. And there is no fallback in the current draft. What happens if, the auction isn't filled? So then nothing gets shut down.
Okay.
So
there's that option. So there is the option that actually this big song and dance about a coal exit, we could be waiting years and years, if not,
Until 26 at least. From 27 they're changing the model, then you don't bid for your plant to go out of the market. They are planning to shut down units based on age. But that is still several years to go.
Absolutely. And I think the crucial element or the crucial question that a lot of carbon market participants want answered is what happens to the AUAs. I mean, that's still up in the air, isn't it, Nora?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
It's not fully mentioned in the draft we have seen so far. It does not say they will be cancelled, and there is a big, I guess, resistance from the finance ministry in Germany to forego the income that auctioning off your allowances generates. But of course, everyone's arguing that if you do not cancel them, then what is the point of any closures? You will just shift the coal production to Eastern European countries. It makes climatically absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
And we keep hearing that. And of course, it will create a huge oversupply.
Yeah, there's that constant balance between the climate and energy minister who want to be seen to doing right for the environment, but then you've got the finance ministry who want to pulling the purse strings. How about in the Nordic region, Olav? What are the key issues here for next year?
Markets in general, I think there is this, of course, the way they adapt to climate targets will be important. I mean, if you look at last year, you had 2 new governments coming up. In Denmark, you had a new, very ambitious target for climate reduction, 70% cut by 2030. So that will mean a lot for even more wind power and maybe more use of interconnectors to other countries. Finland had a very high ambitious carbon neutrality target by 2035, which will speed up their way away from coal, away from fossil fuels and more wind. They're building a lot of wind power in Finland without subsidies now.
Seems a very common thread, this wind.
Yeah, it's win-win. It's a win-win situation.
It's a win-win, yeah, exactly.
And of course, the Finns also have a higher local spot price. So in that sense, makes it more profitable in Finland, even though the wind conditions may not be as good as in Norway. They have lower prices on average, higher prices on average, which is so that's one aspect that will be important this year.
Absolutely. Any other notable?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's is 1 year from now, but in the end of 2020, the new link between Norway and Germany. Okay. The Nordic interconnector 1.4 gig will start test runs, and then you have the first direct link from the Norwegian power market to Germany, and that might very hard to say how the flow would go. There's grid constraints in Germany. What will happen if the prices in Norway are lower than in Germany, and the flow should go south, but will you be able to export the power? We have been asking Statnett, the Norwegian TSO, this over and over, and we never, to put it mildly, we don't get a clear answer.
Exactly. And maybe they don't have a clear answer. No. Well, I would hope they would, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think they're a bit nervous and excited as well, just to see how it will be.
Because the sort of idea has often been that you have the Nordic region as the battery for continental Europe, but that may not necessarily be true then, if I understand you. It could be German wind being exported to Norway.
Definitely, in a large scale. But it's so hard to predict and so hard to model, I think. So we speak to analysts and they don't dare to come with a clear answer. So it will. And one example is maybe the Cobra link between the Netherlands and Denmark that was started up in September this year, and not all, but many analysts pointed to this as a clear export cable from the Nordic region to the Netherlands. But then, due to the low gas prices, power in Netherlands have been cheaper than in the Nordic regions, and there has been a lot of imports on that cable. So quite the opposite.
It all depends on the fundamentals, of course, and the weather, etc., etc. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I know that Norwegian industry has always been very opposed to new cables and interconnectors because they fear the higher prices. But maybe they might start welcoming them with open arms.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you combine it with the build out of more wind power.
So how about from a market perspective? What are you hearing from people out there, Morten? What are the key areas that will be important in 2020?
I think it's very important for people to take part in the market, because the market has been criticized for not having enough traders, hedgers, not trading the short or the medium term products, and not hedge in the way that they did. And what I'm looking forward to for next year would be maybe to have an increased liquidity in the nearest products.
These actors are very important. They're an important part of the market, and hope to see them coming back in. What about in Germany related to the coal exit? Are we, there are also these big, huge lignite plants. Yeah. What's happening here? They may be announcing some closures or not. What's the story?
Yeah, so far the lignite closures have been excluded from the draft. Those 4 gigs I mentioned earlier were only for hard coal. And the problem there is that there's basically two huge producers, RWE and LEAG, and so you cannot have tenders. So you need to negotiate on a sort of bilateral basis. And what we have heard so far is there is no agreement because one producer is demanding fantasy prices, we have heard, for closing. Whereas apparently RWE is more willing or has a better idea of what prices they might live with for closing some of their capacity. Now, if there is agreement, and fairly quickly, we may see closures from RWE potentially as early as next year, but we don't know any details or how much capacity that will be. Though, of course, there are plans to sort of cut lignite-fired output by 3.1 gigawatt already by the end of 2022. So those have to come most likely from the Rhineland, which is RWE's heartland.
Okay, so there could be more developments there in the months ahead. I think from my perspective, really, as well, looking at France, I think that's going to be a key driver of prices. And I think, we'll get some more details about the CRUAS elements. We'll get some more into the steam generator issues at some of the reactors. But I think we'll also see the start of the fourth 10-year inspections of a whole fleet of French nuclear plants, which according to our calculations so far this year, the third 10-year extensions, all the ones that had 10-year inspections this year, were delayed by up to 400 days. So I think we'll be keeping. This is something that we'll be looking or keeping a very close eye on, especially the French team. But on a more of a policy side, there's the new commission coming in, Olav. If they announce a more ambitious climate policy, that could have a clear impact on prices, certainly, and on the market structure.
Yeah, you had your new European Commission approved by the Parliament, and the new commissioner from Germany, von der Leyen, she says that she wants to increase the CO2 emission cut targets. She wants to even introduce a carbon border tax, which can be crucial, by sort of putting a CO2 price on imported goods and even electricity imports. And you saw this week that the European Parliament, they said they wanted a 55% reduction target by 2030, up from 40% currently, putting pressure on the new Commission to deliver. And even declared a carbon crisis, as they call it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Commission then have to align all their policies with this 1.5 degree target from the Paris Accord. So all these things will push them in the right direction. But we already see the NGOs coming out and say these new commission plans aren't ambitious enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So there will be pressure to be even more ambitious, clearly.
And I think it's coming not just from the parliament or the companies or the NGOs, but also from the population at large, from the grassroots level. You know, the Greta Thunberg, the Extinction Rebellion. I think these will start to have a bit of a snowball effect here. If we stay with 2020, Morten, if you had a magic wand and I could grant you a wish, what would your wish be for 2020, Morten?
That was a tricky question, Richard. My wish would be that players are supporting the market and really comes back into where they were some years ago, maybe with sharing or increasing the liquidity, and also you meant transparency also, which could absolutely improve in certain markets, and that is something we will of course support, and we are doing that by you, of course, the news desk. And also by addressing all these different topics on the conference that we'll make in 2020.
How about you, Gert? If I grant you one magic wish, one wish for the market, what would you want?
I haven't prepared.
Keep it clean. Keep it clean, Gert. For me personally, I think I would like to see more transparency around French nuclear plants. I think often the information is lacking, it's very scant, it comes late, it's got holes in it, we don't really know what's going on. I think if I had a magic touch with the CEO of EDF or ASN, I'd say please grant us more information about this, because I think it would calm the market down, it would provide with that kind of robust feeling that we know what's going on.
And I would say get the grid building going. It's crucial to utilize all the wind and solar power that is being built. You need to ship the power around to get an efficient market, and there's so much lagging.
It's snail's pace.
Yeah, and both regular side and governments and TSOs, it's too slow. They have to speed up. That would be good for the market, I think.
Absolutely. How about you, Olav?
Yeah,
what would you wish from the market?
You mentioned transparency. I think is also crucial to get the information and get it easy accessible. Maybe on a European platform that is easy to use, that can give people information about available outages and so on. That would be great. And from a journalistic perspective, it would also be good to have executives speaking their mind, giving us good stories in 2020. That would
exactly.
be
Yes. The key quotes, the killer quotes. I think that would be very useful. How about you, Nora?
I don't know, nobody will ever speak to me again, but I would just like more gutsy German politicians. I think they really just need to follow through on what they started. They come with very big ambitions every time, and then it gets rolled back. It gets rolled back step by step, and you end up with a construction that is neither meat or fish, or whatever they say sometimes. And that means every 3 years we revisit the same points over and over and over again. We have not come any further than we were 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it's really just time for a bigger push.
And I think this is what Gert was mentioning here, is also about the grid. I think that's certainly been in Germany. What was the plan? Nearly 2,000 kilometres, and they built 26 last year or something, or this year, I mean?
No, I think that was per quarter. But the problem is once you've got everything ruled up and ready to go, you can build quite quickly. But we always see opposition, and they're trying to find new ways of sort of stymieing that opposition. Like if we give more leeway, if we allow wider sort of distances to housing, or that you don't see, the cables that are being built, then this will reduce opposition. You just open up a new can of worms. You can't please everybody, and someone just has to be bold enough to say that. And who knows, the current Grand Coalition isn't doing particularly well. If it all goes, belly up, we may have another election, and the Greens are looking fairly strong. Maybe they can bring the push needed, but you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a clear call for politicians to stand by their convictions there and go for it. Be bold, be courageous.
If they have any.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To sort of round off here, Morten, I'd like to sort of finish with you, because obviously 2020 is going to be a very busy year for Montel, and we have a very big calendar for events. Could you say a few words about that, Morten?
Absolutely, Richard. All the topics that we have talked about now here in this pod will also be covered in the different events that we will make in 2020 all over Europe, starting in in Denmark and in Oslo, and we also have an iPal event in Austria where we will cover issues related to what's going on in the Swiss and Austrian region. That is important. Further on, we will talk about the nuclear situation in France on our French Energy Day in April, and moving along to Germany and to Stockholm and to Finland as well, where we have regional conferences covering all European matters. We have 20 events throughout the next year, which will be of key interest for so many people, I think.
Covering all the key topical issues that I think will continue to drive not just markets but also policy, and hopefully will cover the most important factors anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as Olav said, having top management to the podium and with interviews from you guys, we will surely lift topics which are relevant for all our listeners in the time to come.
Absolutely, and hopefully we'll have some brave politicians as well coming, not afraid to speak their mind. Excellent, guys. Thank you all very much for joining this end of year Christmas special. It's just enough for me to say ho 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 ho, Merry Christmas! Thank you, listeners. That's all for now. Remember to keep up to date on all the latest news on Montel Online, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can subscribe to the Montel Weekly podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Happy Christmas!